Hey everybody, thanks for tuning back into Tuesday Cruiser Chat with Otram. Same as usual, no plan for this evening, just whatever you guys want to talk about. Oh, it's one branded. Yeah, whatever you guys want to talk about. I'm down for trying to answer questions. To Vicken, I just did an MLS gasket on a 1FZ like 2 weeks ago. Just fired it up today, and so far so good. We got to start test driving it, but fired up and runs smoothly. Got the intro video on the Shop 80 out over the weekend, or maybe it was Monday. I don't remember when that went up. And I've got a couple of videos partially filmed using that as a subject, doing rear pads, rotors, and calipers on an 80, rear wheel bearings on an 80, and fixing the stuck parking brake on an 80. So yeah, so I got a couple of videos in the work for that. What just came up? 99 LX470 code 1126. Dealer says it's magnetic clutch on the throttle body. I have never run into that. Yeah, I've never run into a throttle body code on LX470 or 100 series. I've heard of them happening, but I've never actually seen it in the shop to diagnose it yet. Let me see if I can pop up the code description for that real quick. Yeah, generally I try to avoid vehicles that have already got check engine lights and codes on. Granted, I say that, and the 80 series I just bought has tons of issues, but it was super duper cheap, and I don't mind fixing them. Yeah, I just popped it up in Toyota information, and it's coming up as magnetic clutch circuit malfunction in the throttle body, and it's saying opener short in the clutch circuit, the magnetic clutch itself, or the computer. So yeah, it could be an intermittent problem. It could be rodent damage in the wiring harness. It's hard to say without looking at it. Yeah, because I've never actually run across diagnosing one of those. And to David Sylvie, I generally don't desmog anything. The fuel control computer and everything was designed with all the smog components, being intact. When you start randomly pulling systems off, you start messing with the feedback for the timing and the fuel control and all that jazz. So generally, I leave that all alone. I don't pull any of it off because technically, even though you may not need it to pass inspection, as far as I understand, it's still technically emissions tampering to remove it, which is not something I will do through the shop. So yeah, we don't do it. And on the ones I've seen that have come through, there's not really much benefit to it that I've seen. And to Dave, how long did it take for the EGRs to start clogging up on the 80s when they're new? We don't see them. I've only ever seen one with a clogged EGR valve. and that one just had received like horrible maintenance, um, lack of oil changes, poor quality oil, and it looked like it was, blow by oil vapors that had actually ended up clogging everything up. Generally, the ones, that we take them apart, they're clean inside. We see more issues with the vacuum switching valve and the modulator and the little vacuum lines and stuff like that. And it seems like every 80 series that comes into the shop has the P0401 code on. And it can be the modulator, it can be the vacuum switching valve, it can be the little hard pipe that goes through the intake gets clogged, it can be a vacuum line loose, it can be the little angly fittings in the throttle body are clogged. And it seems like you chase it around and you finally get it to work, and then 2 months later something else in the system goes wrong. Yeah, it seems like it's a never-ending thing to chase. And why are you taking the upper plenum off to do a valve cover gasket? Um, you only have to take the throttle body off. Leave the upper plenum in place unless you're going in search of issues. Yeah, it's if you're going to take the upper plenum off, replace the little vacuum switching valve that's under there, and make sure that the vacuum pipe that kind of cuts through the intake back towards the back, make sure that's cleared out. That's the most common issue we see, is that back line clogging up. Yeah, it is easier to get to the VSV with the upper intake off. I thought you were taking the intake off just to do the valve cover gasket. But yeah, trying to get that VSV out with the intake still on is completely terrible. Yeah, no problem. Sorry, it wasn't a definitive answer. I've never run into magnetic clutch circuit problems. The vast majority of the 100 series LX470 we see coming through are for timing belts and suspension. Hey, Logan, how's it going? And Dave, you don't know terrible until you come look at the new Shop 80. I pulled the rear axle flanges out to do wheel bearings, and the retainer screws for the rear wheel bearings fell out with the axle flange, which is awesome because there was nothing really holding the wheel bearings from unthreading their adjusters. It's going to be a lot of work to get that truck running, but I'll have an 80 and it'll be cool. I went through 3 cans of degreaser today just to get to where I could see the parking brake hardware. The rear axle seals had been leaking so long. Yeah, I know the previous owner. I don't think the Shady 80 was a well-maintained cream puff. But it will be a sweet shop truck when it's all buttoned up. We've started hoarding parts for it. So I can, work on it here and there. Try to get running over the next few weekends. And then drive it and see what's next to explode before we start lifting it and working on bumpers and stuff. The title had your name on it. Need to replace front and rear sway bar links. Is it okay to install longer, stronger ones with a standard HC suspension? Putting longer ones in with the suspension still at stock height is gonna kind of put your sway bars at a funky angle, and it may make them bind more. You could try putting them in. I would just look in to see what it does to the bushings, because it's likely going to put some bind on the bushings, them being longer and the truck not being lifted. So I would probably use just the factory length ones if it were me. Yeah, you know what's funny is I've had a 60 series and now the 80 series, and that's the only cruisers I've had. Everything else has been Toyota cars or pickups or 4Runners. And Vicken just briefly talked about the head gasket. I did an MLS Cometic gasket a couple of weeks ago on the one we did the head gasket video on. Actually just got it running this afternoon, fired it up for the first time. And so far, so good. We're going to have to test drive it, double check for leaks and any issues, but it fired up and ran smoothly. That's to Logan. That's called the parking brake bell crank. And I just started shooting a video on that this evening before I left the shop, because one of them is rusted solid on the Shady 80. So yeah, video out soon. If you can get the pin out and freed up, you can like sandblast it or file it, clean it up, and put it all back together with grease. And all as well. Otherwise, you can get the little aluminum housings from Toyota still, and they're reasonably priced. I think they're like $20, so they're not bad. To Dave, yes, you should take it someplace to get the R134 sucked out of it before you take it off. If it's all leaked out, then it'll be empty. But ideally, you want it recovered. And then once you get the AC compressor back in, you're going to want to take it someplace to have them, evacuate it, pull it under a deep vacuum to get all the moisture out, and then, charge it back up. If you charge it without evacuating it, you're going to have a lot of issues. I'm losing track of people. I haven't done an alternator upgrade on a 3FE yet. We just did one on a 1FZ. We put, I think it was a Sequoia alternator in with Photoman's kit. And that seemed to work very well. But I haven't done any upgrading on a 3FE yet. And to Logan, the problem is it's a steel arm inside an aluminum bracket, and they just corrode together. What we do is use like a waterproof brake grease, and we just pack it in there so that moisture, theoretically can't get back in and corrode everything again. And so far, that seems to be the trick to holding up well. To Lucas, I'm assuming you're talking 1FZ in an 80 series. Off the top of my head, I want to say it's about $600. Just a second, and I can pull it up. I take that back. I can't pull it up. I haven't put it into the new system yet. I think it's around $600. We do front main seal, the oil pump O-ring, the alternator and AC belts, and the distributor O-ring when we do them. Yeah, Dave, let me know. Pulling them down and charging them back up isn't any trouble at all. And yeah, number 6 seems to be the most common leak on the 80 series as far as head gaskets go. It's stuck back next to the firewall, back in the back where all the heat accumulates. And that seems to be the most common one to pop. Either 6 to the water jacket or between 5 and 6 are what we see the most. You've just got to, if you're going to use an MLS head gasket, you've got to make sure your machinist decks the head to the proper surface finish. And you've also got to check the block to make sure that it's smooth enough to accept the new gasket. The MLS ones are not tolerant of scratches, dips, anything like that. In one of the 80 series head gasket videos, I think it's the second one, I show how we check the block and everything to make sure they're smooth enough. I had an old Supra back in the day, and I did an MLS head gasket on it, and the machine shop that did my head didn't get the head surface finish smooth enough, and I didn't know any better back then and put it all back together, and you could smell coolant. You could smell coolant until the engine warmed up every time you warmed it up. This is the first MLS gasket that we've installed. Most of the time, like 99.9% of the time, we use the factory Toyota head gaskets. The only reason we went with MLS for this one is because the head was warped more than normal, so it had to get cut further. And in the MLS gaskets, you can get them in custom thicknesses. So we used the thickness of the gasket to make up for the extra material we had to take off the head to keep the timing chain the same length. And this one also might get turboed in the future. So the Cometic head gasket was good for that. If you're thinking of turbo or supercharging it, then an MLS gasket makes sense. Although Toyota ran the TRD supercharger on the factory head gaskets, and we've got several customers running supercharged trucks on factory head gaskets, and they're holding up fine. So yeah, the main reason I went with MLS on this one was just to get the custom thickness to make up for the extra material we had to cut off. I don't. I've seen pictures of the front control arm drop brackets, but I've never actually seen one in person. They just, from what I've seen, they hang down really low and seem like they'd be stump catchers. But yeah, we usually use either the bushings or the caster plates. LX470 ride is very bouncy. HC is still working. My best guess would be that your accumulator globes have popped. The accumulators are kind of what is the shock in the AHC system. They let the strut pressures go back and forth, and if those pop, the pump will fill what should be the gas side full of fluid, and it just stiffens everything up. Without looking at it and without seeing the pressure numbers, that would be a guess. And to Logan, I would probably do caster plates. The caster plates seem like the stronger way to go, because when you drop that bracket, you're putting extra torque on the frame for the bracket coming back, and it looks like you would catch all kinds of stuff with it hanging down that much further. So I would it would be my opinion to keep the factory radius arms and in the factory bracket and do caster plates. The only downside that I've run across with caster plates is if you've got one of the heavier wall tie rods, you can sometimes get drag, like the tie rod will rub the top of the radius arm after you've done caster plates. We've run into a couple of them that way. But I just ordered caster plates for the Shady 80 yesterday. I had to order some other stuff from Metal Tech, so I threw caster plates for my truck on the order while I was at it. Metal Tech has good caster plates. I think the Tough Dog ones that Trail Taylor sells are good. I am personally not a fan of the land tank style ones just because of drilling the holes. Like you've got to drill a bunch of 7/8 inch holes. I think it's 7/8 through the radius arm brackets, and it sucks to drill all those holes. So I prefer the style where you just trim the bottom of the factory radius arm and put the new brackets on. And to Dave, my original plan was to do Slinky Icon until I started looking at costs. And I can get like Old Man Emu J springs for less than I can get one pair of Slinky springs. And I love the ride of the Slinky suspension. Like, that is my dream suspension. But it's really hard to justify, excuse me, for as little as I'm going to drive the Shady 80. And, it's going to be a beater wheeling truck. So it's hard to justify doing, Slinky Icon. I've kind of switched plans. I'm probably going to do Old Man Emu J springs, probably Fox shocks. And then I'm not sure, caster plates and probably Trail Taylor rear control arms. And piece that all together that way. The Shady 80 by necessity is going to kind of have to be a hand-me-down salvage part, what I can get cheap kind of vehicle. Because it's really hard to justify spending big bucks on a truck that I'm just going to go beat around in the woods a couple of times a year. The Old Man Emu J springs, I think, are like 3.5 inch lift. Although I'm not positive. It also depends on, bumpers and all that jazz. If they don't get me where I want to be, I'll just make a set of spacers to adjust from there. But yeah, we're going super low budget where we can. Doing the rear brakes, the rotors were shot, and I had a set of Terrain Tamer takeoff rotors that came off another customer's trucks that were warped. So I tossed them on the big lathe and skimmed them this morning. So we will see. Toward rotors are fused to the wheel hub. Did you take the bolts out? There's usually a couple of bolts on the inside of the rotor that sometimes can be rusted over and hard to see. If not, generally a big hammer will get those off. Soak them down. Okay, soak them down with like Freol, like in the joint where the rotor and the hub come together, and just beat the hell out of them until they come off, because I'm assuming you're going to put new rotors on anyway. So I just beat them and don't care. And generally, eventually they'll come off. I don't even use a big brass hammer on the rotors, because if I'm taking them off, I'm replacing them. So we just beat them until they come loose. Yeah, if you just got 1/4-inch fuel line for diff breather kits, I just go to like Tractor Supply and get the lawnmower fuel filters, the little inline ones. Those work great. And to Mike, I have no idea who makes those bar stools. My wife ordered them. I want to say they came from like Wayfair.com. but I could be completely wrong. She has the vision for what the house should look like, and she just tells me what to build. So I do all the building, and she buys all the stuff that fills it out. 96 80 series that's smoking, knocking on the bottom end. So what we normally quote for rebuild is you can still get a factory Toyota short block. So that's, your block, your pistons, your rings, your crank, your bearings, all that jazz. We write a new Toyota short block, new timing chain, timing cover, oil pump, water pump, and then rebuild your existing head. And, depending on where you're located, like around here, we don't have a machinist that I would trust to do the machine work on the crank and the block. I've got an excellent machine shop guy for doing cylinder heads, but he outsources block and crank machining, and I haven't had the most awesome of luck there. So we generally write the new Toyota short blocks. We've also installed, I think it was Jarco, like Jarco. They do a Remand 1FZ. I don't recall the price on it, but it was really nice looking. And the gasket set that came with it was a Toyota gasket set. And you know what we could see on it, it looked to be, a lot of Toyota parts. And we put that in a couple of years ago and haven't seen it back for anything. So I would assume it's holding up well. But yeah, I guess long story short, I probably wouldn't take the bottom end like to a local machine shop. If you're going to go in that far, I would do the Toyota short block, because I doubt anybody in the aftermarket is going to hold the tolerances that Toyota does when they put the bottom end together. And that was really long and rambly. Whew, and I am sore. I decided to take up running and went running for the first time yesterday. And it is not a good feeling today. 2016 200 series. How are the secondary fuel tank jobs? We've only done one so far, and I don't remember what year it was. I think it was a 2015, but should be similar. And we've got a video of it in the 200 series playlist. It wasn't bad at all. It's pretty straightforward. Take the old stuff out, or take, the spare tire cross member out. There's some trimming, but for the most part, it goes in pretty easily. I was super impressed. And to John Dean, any idea what an out-the-door price is for a 1FZ rebuild with you? So I just quoted one like last week, and it was a little bit different because we quoted it supercharged and stuff like that. So it got quoted with a Cometic head gasket and ARP studs, and removing the old engine, taking it all apart, swapping what we're reusing onto the new short block, and all the new parts, and machine work for the head. I want to say it was like 10.5, without the Cometic gasket and the ARP studs. It'd probably be right around 10 grand. And very cool. Yeah, I like those stools. They're very comfortable. When we redid the kitchen, we did a large center island with the stove on one side and like a breakfast seating area on the other side. And they're super comfy. I'm gonna go grab another drink real quick. I will be right back. Whew. Sorry about that. Apparently did not drink enough at the at the shop this afternoon. I'm wicked thirsty. And to Dave, do I do the windshield R&R reseal job? I do not. I just had the glass shop next door, Brown's, do the windshield in the Shady 80. So far, so good. But yeah, we don't do any glass work in the shop. And to Alive Outside, it's a long-range automotive tank that we got from Cruiser Brothers. George and Ward are importing them, and they are super awesome guys to deal with. And the Skittles, depending on the truck, there's a couple of places you can go through. 99 Land Cruiser. On the 100 series, I'm pretty sure we go through. There's a grommet in the driver's side firewall that there's room that you can snake more through it. And we generally go in through that grommet, and you can just kind of chase it down from there. And to Sullivan, yes, sticky throttle cable is very, very common on the 90, well, all the 1FZs. It seems to be more common on the 93, 94s. I don't know if they had a different cable or what. But they seem to have more sticky cables than the 95 to 97s, and I don't know why. But yeah, we've done quite a few throttle cables. Put a new one on and it feels the same. That's weird. I would doubt it would be throttle body. My first thought would be the kickdown cable that goes down to the transmission, because when your throttle cable pulls on the throttle body, it also pulls that kickdown cable. So if that kickdown cable is sticky, that could be it too. You can always just hand rotate the throttle and see if that feels sticky. And I have never used an aftermarket throttle cable. I always just get them from Toyota. But yeah, I have seen sticky kickdown cables as well. And the Skittles, it's not pre-cut. Like it's a fairly sizable grommet, and the wiring harness that goes through it kind of floats in the middle. So we use, it looks like a huge hypodermic needle that you can punch a hole through the grommet and then feed your wires through the center of the needle and then pull it back out, and it lets the grommet close back around them. That's the easiest way to do it. You can also take diagonal cutters and snip an X into the face of the grommet and push wiring through that way, and then seal it up with a little bit of RTV afterwards. Trilly, you're fine. You don't need to go out and chase things. You want to be on chat? Come here. Jump up. Jump up. Look at the people on the TV. Can you see the people? Yeah, it looks like a big chunk of cable coming through there, but there is room to snake around it. And to Logan, it depends on exactly what all we're doing. Basic spring and shock install, I want to say it's around 500. And then I want to say if we're doing caster bushings, that adds another like 250 or 3. But we don't do customer supplied parts. So it's always package deal, parts, and labor. Um, 9680 series developed a driveline vibration. If it's not the drive shaft, could it be the transfer case? It could be the transfer case. I've never actually seen an 80 series transfer case cause a vibration. We have seen a ton of drive shafts, like the slip joints in them going bad, cause lots of vibration. And I've also seen lots of pinion bearings, either front or rear, getting sloppy and causing vibration. Haven't seen it out of the transfer case yet, though. And to Tulsa Mike, caster bushing required for an 80 lift. I've seen, tons of people do like the 2.5-inch lift, and not do caster bushings. And it's okay-ish on the highway. Your return to center is not great, and it kind of likes to follow the crown of the road. So, generally I try to get people to either do caster bushings or caster plates. So yeah, I would, definitely change the caster when you do the lift, to get it back into spec. It'll handle much better. But I guess technically you can get away without doing it. The transfer case, underdrive, overdrive kit. I'm trying to think. You're asking me all these hard questions. And it depends. It depends on the installer. Like if we're pulling the transfer case, doing the gears, and then putting the transfer case back in, or if somebody just sends us a transfer case, and we just do the gears. Like if we pull the transfer case, do the gears, and put it all back together, I think it's around $900 for labor. And it's less if we're not pulling the transfer case. And the Tulsa Mike, now the low lift, the one that's like 3/4 of an inch, that one's fine. You don't need the caster correction for that. But like once you get around 2.5-ish, 2.5 inch and above, you got to start changing caster. Yeah. Anything over the low lift, I would do caster. And Logan, don't talk to me about squiggly math. I don't know about squiggly math. Yeah, with the 2.5 inch, I'd do caster bushings. And the stock height or low lift heavies drive really awesome. And to Vicken, almost all the head gaskets we do in the engine bay. The one in the video, we pulled the engine because we were also doing front main seal, oil pump cover, and the rear main seal. So since we had to pull the transmission off the back anyhow, we decided to pull the whole drivetrain. With the shop and the engine hoist and the lift and everything, it's actually, sometimes easier to pull the engine and the transmission and the transfer case all as one chunk and split them on the floor. We decided to do that rather than pull the transmission off underneath, pull the head off, from the top of the bay, we just pulled it all out and, did all the repairs outside of the vehicle. But most of the time we do the head gasket in the truck. Yeah, I've heard J springs can get wonky. I'm gonna do caster plates to get a little bit more out of them, and stiffer shocks. And luckily, it's not really going to be a highway truck. It'll get driven to go wheeling, but that's about it. And to Hank, I've never done the washer mod. I've seen it. I've seen threads on it, but I've never actually done it myself. We always just do bushings or plates. I don't have a video on the rear main seal. I just did one like a couple of weeks ago, but it was one of those, the engine, it was the head gasket truck, and I just really quickly threw a rear main seal and resealed the arch thingy while it was sitting on the floor before we slammed the transmission back on it. And I didn't even think about doing a video. So if we have to do another one, I will shoot a video on it. Yeah, I haven't done the MAF drop brackets. Logan was asking up above about the drop brackets. And yeah, that is a long drive coming from Minnesota to Virginia. But yeah, we're here. What about a rough and low idle when not warmed up? After driving about 15 minutes, it calms back down to normal. It's hard to say without looking at the data stream. My gut inclination is the coolant temp sensor not reading correctly. But that's just a gut guess without actually having it in front of me. And what's my opinion of the high mileage UZJ100? I am very much against them. Only because locally they all rot out. They're horrible rust buckets. It seems like the drivetrains hold up well on them, but around here the frames and bodies are rotting away. So I generally try to steer people away from them. If you live in a rust-free place, they may be better. I mean, we see the drivetrains go 350, 400,000 miles. So that's not a huge deal. Oh, and to Tulsa Mike, if it's a 94, I'm chasing that exact issue on a 94 right now. And I think it's vacuum leak related on the one I'm working on. So tune back next week. I might have an answer for you. And for what have I seen to be the major source for driveline slack in the 100 series? We haven't seen a ton of them come through with driveline slack. We've done a couple of drive shafts for slip joints. And then we had one last week that one of the CV axles and the drive flange just completely stripped apart. It had I'm assuming before it actually let completely go, it must have had a ton of driveline slack as the splines got worn. And then it finally had no go. And to Sullivan, the arch support, the one FZ's weird. The rear main seal doesn't go directly into the back of the block. It goes into like an aluminum housing that then gets glued onto the back of the block and the oil pan. So that's the arch support thing, which actually makes it easier because you don't actually have to pry the rear main seal out from the crank. You just unbolt the arch support, pop it off, change the seal, and then glue everything back together. And I'm not sure what the 205 reseal is. And sometimes RPMs go down to 400 on the 96. It's hard to say without looking at the data stream. That's the easiest way for me to figure things out. I've seen them go wonky when the intake boot that goes between the mass airflow sensor and the throttle body, when that starts to get cracked, as you come on and off the throttle, it'll open up the cracks and make it idle funky. But yeah, otherwise, yeah, my first choice would be to look at the data and see what the fuel trims are doing when it idles down, and what the sensor data is. You guys are fine. We'll go out in a minute. To John Dean, I am not an alignment person, but it sounds like you've got an alignment issue. Either that, it could be an alignment issue, you could have a sticky caliper, or your steering box could be going bad. And I haven't seen it happen on an 80. The only one I've seen it happen on was a Chevy pickup, but the servo in the power steering box that changes the flow of the fluid was sticky. So, turning one direction, it would make the fluid, go the proper direction. But when you went to turn the other way, the servo valve was sticking and it wouldn't give any power assist to the other direction. But yeah, I would start with getting an alignment, because usually that'll figure out the issues. And I haven't done the WRX seat swap. The only 80 series seat swap I've done is I put some Lexus ones in one like 20 years ago. And it was a horrible pain because of the way the 80 series transmission tunnel is so wide that the brackets are offset. So it seems it wanted to put the seat way higher in order to get the brackets under it. And I haven't messed with one since then. And what does OTRAM stand for? Back when we were first started, I was a mobile mechanic. So it's on the road again, mobile mechanic. And then I was lazy and never changed it. Just shortened it down to the acronym. And yeah, no video on the seat brackets. Yeah, I did it once years ago and just was never happy with the way it turned out and haven't tried to do it since. We don't do a ton of custom fab at the shop. Like, we're set up to do it, but I just don't have the time to do it a lot of times, as much as I'd like to. Like, I'm probably going to buy bumpers for R80 just because I don't have time to build them. On a 97, I'm trying to think. I don't think it normally, like, it doesn't noticeably retard the timing when you jumper it for to do the timing. It just locks it so it doesn't change while you're timing. At least that's my understanding of it. The 93 80 series will flash the check engine light because the jumper for setting the timing is also the jumper for reading codes on the 93. But on the 97, you read them through the OBD2 port, so it makes sense that it wouldn't blink. You do not want a tour of my toolbox. I am a tool junkie, and I have way too many specialty tools, or because it makes it easier tools. But yeah, that is a good idea for a video one of these days. One of these days I should shoot a tools we use most often video. And to John Dean, do I recommend timing chain replacement on an 80 with over 200,000 miles? I would only go in for a timing chain if I thought it had an issue, because the head's got to come off and the oil pan's got to come off to get the timing cover off. So it is not a fun job. We've done a ton of head gaskets, with 250,000 miles on them. And, the chains have always been in good shape. So I don't really see them wearing out, not like the old 4-cylinder pickups did. It seems to be a pretty stout chain design. So I would only go in after it if you've actually got an issue. Yeah, I guess I need to do an updated shop tour, because we've added the lathe and the parts washer and a new drill press and a bunch of specialty junk since the last time I did a shop tour. I've been holding off on it because right now the shop it's not messy, but it's cluttered because we've run out of room because I've bought too many tools. So I've been trying to hold off until we get the other half of the building and can spread everything back out again, and the shop looks normal before I do a new video. Because yeah, we've got a lot of stuff to move around. And I really love the new old drill press. I think it's such a beast to use. I've got an addiction to World War II era machining equipment, apparently. Now I just need to find a real vertical mill. I've got a small Burke horizontal, and it gets us by for the little bit of stuff we do. But I really want, a Bridgeport or something similar for a vertical mill. Um, 93 transfer case shifter, really hard to move when it's cold. It could be just that depending on how cold, it could just be that the fluid in the transfer case is really thick. And hard to move. Or it could be the pivots, the plastic bushings are seizing up when it's cold. Trying to think of anything else. That's all I can think of off the top of my head that would make it hard to shift. It would be just like really thick fluid. 94 80 series exhaust kit. I do not have any current recommendations. Yeah, the 93 94 stuff is getting about impossible to find. Theoretically, the exhaust kit that we build for the 95 97s should be able to be adapted, but I haven't actually done it in the shop to know for sure. 35-inch tires, drawers, bumpers. What's my preferred regear method? It depends on whether or not you already have factory lockers or if you're planning on doing lockers. If you're already going into the axles to do lockers, then I would gear at the axle end because you're opening them up anyway. If you've got e-lockers already, or you're not planning on doing lockers, I would do the transfer case gears. Like Logan says, it's easier. You don't have to mess with the ring and pinion setup. It's one case, one and done, and it seems to be stronger. So I prefer transfer case gears unless we're going in to do lockers at the same time, and then we'll do them together. And to Eric, the 1FC crank pulley tool was back in stock. I think I sold the last one, went out this morning. I have another batch on order that should be coming in from the water jet cutter anytime now. I kind of would have expected it to have shipped by now, but I haven't seen it. So I should have them back in stock within like a couple of days to a week. And to Mike, we don't actually keep our own shirts at the shop. I got a couple of these for Crash and I. When I set them up, it's on Store Frontier or something along those lines. There's a description or a link down in the description to get them. To John, if you're planning on doing the hair-up lockers, I would regear at the axles at the same time, because you could get a little bit lower that way. The transfer case gears don't quite compensate for 35s. So you could do 488s with the hair-ups and then, get you right back in stock. And Art, yeah, we've done Denso radiators, and they're super high quality. We generally do either Denso, Koyo, or factory. But yeah, I've had no problems out of the Denso ones. And my wife would kill me if I sent you a chair. And cool. Have a good one, Dave. I'm not sure if I'm making Tech Day, but I will try to get down there. I've been slacking on making it to Tech Days when they're not at my shop. What tool is it that we use to measure the preload when setting up the pinion? It's a torque wrench, but it measures in inch pounds instead of foot pounds, and it's a dial type. So it's nice, as you're spinning it, you can watch the dial for the reading, without, like, you don't want a clicker type torque wrench. My original one was the beam style where the needle deflected. I like the dial style one much better. But it's just a dial type inch pound torque wrench. And is there a way to install caster correction bushings without a shop press? There is, but it's probably going to cost more than a shop press. SP Tools and Mueller Coops both sell what they call a press and pull sleeve kit. And it's like, it's cups that go on either side of the bushings with a long threaded bolt that goes through them. And you tighten up the bolt and it presses the bushings in and out. And it's a ton of work. And the press and pull kits are super expensive. And I've used mine to do caster correction bushings, and every time I've done it, I've blown the pull rod to pieces and had to warranty it. So we just do them in the shop press now. And if you're going to do them in the shop press, get the Wits and press tool. It makes it insanely easier. And to one more thing, on our website, I think I have a link. If you go to otram.com and you go to the videos in the drivetrain video section, I think there's a link to the to the torque wrench we use on Amazon. If you've got almost new shocks and you're using the low lift, you should be totally fine to reuse them. We've done quite a few using the Oldman Emu heavy low lift springs with factory Toyota shocks. And it rides really nice. Cool. And if you guys don't mind, I'm going to jump off of here for the evening. The dogs are pacing behind me, ready for their dinner. So thanks to everybody for tuning in. If you haven't subscribed, subscribe below. And if you really dig the YouTube channel, check out our Patreon link down in the description. Brandon, check out our Patreon link down in the description. Any support is much appreciated. And to Eric, the Thorley headers, I don't think they add a ton of power, but you can, there's some seat of the pants power. We generally install them over the factory manifolds just because the price is about the same. So yeah, I like the Thorley headers. But yeah, okay, I'm tuning out. I will catch you guys next week. Same time, same place. Thanks for tuning in.